Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special episode of the Pog State. This is episode 16. I don't think anyone thought that we were going to make it this far. However, here we are. So screw the haters or whatever. I do want to start off by actually doing the disclaimer because I often forget, and I'm going to get straight into it. So this episode, this show does not represent the thoughts and feelings of Riot Korea or any Riot-affiliated organization across the world. My cat has agreed to this as well. Also signed an NDA, so everything is going to be absolutely fine. Our opinions are our own, and if they're not something that Riot likes, then I think that that's a little bit more okay, considering the fact that we've let you guys know that it does not represent them. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. Of course, guys, you can check out the Pog State on a whole lot of different mediums. YouTube does have the video side of everything, but if you're more of an audio-inclined person, Spotify's there, Apple Podcasts, all sorts of stuff, if you want to be able to consume your Pog State. And so, I'm Atlus, this is LS. LS, how you been doing, my man? We've been casting some worlds, having some good times. How's life?
Life's been very busy. In addition to, Worlds, like you and I are casting it from Lowell Park, but I still do the live streams, and I have a lot of other stuff going on in my daily life that, I've been running around a lot with, but pretty much that. It's actually been, I think, the most physically busy that I've been all year.
Oh, really? Like in and out of the death realm a little more than you would otherwise like?
Yeah, I've left my house more in the last 3 weeks than I probably did in the last year. So
how many times is that? Like 7, 8? Normally
I don't actually have to leave my building because the supermarket is basement 2. So yeah. I just, I get into the elevator and I go down, but now I'm experiencing some difficulty.
Yeah, now you got like the actual life thing going on. Well, that's very exciting. Yep. It's a little bit shrouded in mystery as to why you're so busy at the moment, but I'm sure people will come to figure out exactly what is going on, why you're so extraordinarily busy very, very soon. One thing I do want to talk about is the fact that we are going to be commentating the next knockout stage between DRX and Damwon that is going to be occurring very, very soon at the time of the release of this video, which is extraordinarily exciting. At this point in time, I think it's only a couple of days away or something like that. So hopefully we're going to be able to get this out to you before that one does actually happen. But Worlds has been pretty crazy, man. I feel like I haven't been at this level of like happy and excited after a Worlds group stage for like 3 years. Maybe even more than that, because I only came to the LCK in 2017, and before that I was an LPL fan, and we weren't winning at that point in time, so as far as the LPL is concerned. So I think this is like the happiest I've been coming out of a group stage, like almost ever. Yeah.
I think that the quarterfinals matchups are all really good. I think this is probably the best quarterfinals matchups we've ever had in World's history, I think, pretty much like across the board. I do know that obviously, if you've been keeping up on Twitter, there's a lot of people that feel very badly about the group stages themselves, despite the viewership has been insane. Yeah. But there were so many non-factor games that were played throughout the group stages where nothing really mattered. I guess there's like pick'ems and other stuff like that, players being forced on stage, not like actually forced, but they have to play their match. That was one of the major complaints, and so I know that that's already like making its rounds. Like, how can we fix this for next year? Is there a way around this by Riot? But I think overall it's been very good. It feels like this Worlds is moving by way faster than previous Worlds because there's like never a day off. It's kind of, it doesn't feel separated.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And also, like, every stage goes into the next really quickly. I think, like, now between, like, quarters and semis and final, that's when we're going to have more of these, like, lulls and longer breaks, I guess. But group stage definitely was very, very quick smart. To go back to your point with, like, the formatting thing, I feel like there's been nothing games every year. Like, that's just what happens when you have, double round robin and 4 teams, right? Like, you're just going to get to the point where there's a team that's been eliminated and another team that's not going to be able to do anything or isn't going to move in their point in the standings. I actually thought that it was done pretty well. Like, often the last game of the day always meant something. And I think that's the most important part, right? Like, if a day dies like halfway through and then there's no point in watching because it's all just set in stone, that's a bit crap. But making sure there's always like something to look forward to, I think is interesting. And we only had like a few of those nothing games.
Yeah, we I can't remember which one it was I felt really bad about. There were like 2 games back to back that didn't mean anything, so it felt like there was a very big gap between
I think the TSM LGD game, that was real rough. I know you and I cast that. And that was very, very tough because both of them weren't getting through, and TSM, all they had was, do we go 0-6 or not?
Right.
And then unfortunately they did, and it was just all bad because even if they win, like, then LGD goes back and gets murdered on social media, like,
right, yeah,
which they're probably getting anyway. But
that was definitely really rough. I think like plans this year was great.
Yeah,
I know that I've been very vocal about that elsewhere. I think that is really, really good. The only like bad news that we've got so far from Worlds this year is that the OPL closed. And it was right after OCE just had its greatest showing ever at Worlds. And I think it really reinforced the idea that even if a region can have like issues, you can still get good teams or players that come out of the region and can actually compete on a world stage level. So that's obviously really bad news bears. But the flip side is that now they're NA residents. So maybe.
And that doesn't mean that like there's no more competition for League of Legends in, Oceania and Australia or whatever. Like, it just means that there's not going to be a Riot produced one, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully, I've seen some tweets going around from like ESL Australia, who I remember I worked with so many years, dating all the way back to 2014. They've always been supporting the scene. Actually, did a lot of the production work for a lot of the OPL events anyway, right? Even though they did have the Riot tag on them, production for live events was actually done largely by a lot of the staff from ESL Australia and sort of a lot of people all grouped together. So I've seen some positive stuff about what they're going to do to try and, keep the game alive. And Oceania will hold on to a world slot and an MSI slot. So it's not 100% bad news. And I think it's only good news that we're also considered NA residents as well, because it means it gives the players, an avenue to progress, right? Because beforehand, it was like, why are you going to import someone from Australia when you could import them from Korea or from Europe or something like that, where they have much more established like leagues and competition, and their solo queues better quality and all that sort of stuff. So it's much easier to get a better player from there. So I think it was tragic, but I think there are silver linings, definitely, that hopefully we can hold on to. I just don't know what it's going to mean. Like, I got so many friends back in Australia that I'm really worried about as far as like careers, and a lot of us, we dedicate everything to esports, and then a plug gets pulled and it's like, oh, I'm in free fall. Oh shit. It's just it can be really terrible. So I'm hoping that, there is an avenue for them to continue.
And I think the one of the other things is like the OPL coaches and staff members and the OPL casters. Yeah, that's another big question mark where a lot of people don't know what's going to happen. Been reached out to by a few where they don't really know what the next move is, because generally importing of coaches and stuff to other regions doesn't really happen all that often in the West.
I mean, it did actually happen quite a lot last year. Remember, there was sort of a mass exodus out of the OPL. Destiny went over to Europe. I think FBI was already in
not
in
players.
America, but Ryoma was already there. But also, Spooks went to coach one of the teams in the LCS. Swiffer did the same thing.
Oh,
and Raz also went over to Golden Guardians at the same time. Like, I mean, he lived in Australia. He wasn't a player, but still.
Wait, Raz is OC? I thought
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
NA.
So Sam Sprooks Broadley, I believe he's working with one of the teams over there, as is Simon Swiffer
Yeah, he
Papamakis.
is. Golden Guardians. Okay. Okay. I didn't know. I did not realize about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think,
Raz is Canada. Okay.
yeah, he's Canadian. Hang on. I think there's more. I think Choo Choo's might be over there or doing something as well. I'm not entirely sure what he's doing, but I didn't really keep up too much. But I know that there has been like a little bit more. As I think I just fed this cat, but he's still going a little bit mental. Hopefully you can bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, no, I think that there are certainly going to be like places where a lot of the players and the players can go, but I'm scared about, you know, casting, because Australia is so far away from a lot of things, and it's hard to move, and there's a lot of, you know, really talented commentators over there that were relying on the OPL as a place to be able to do what they love in the place that they love to do it, and not everyone has the luxury of just, you know, flying over to Korea and starting a whole nother life there. You know, there's a lot of people that have a lot of extra stuff tying them to where they are. So it's, you know, this sort of decision that I was able to make is something that can be much more difficult for a lot of others.
Yeah, agree.
It's rough. Anyway, let's bring it back to Worlds just a little bit, because yes, play-ins, best showing for the OCE, but hopefully it doesn't mean the end. Outside of that, though, there were some really interesting things that came out of play-ins. I think PSG was one that we should talk about, with having to use 3 substitutes and then 1 substitute, and then with the fact that Uniboy and Kongyue looked really, really good, and then Tank and River came in and didn't necessarily look as good. Like, what did you think about that whole sort of PSG outcome?
The PSG thing's really weird, because I felt like if they were going to be allowed to use subs and plans, then they should have been allowed to continue to use them throughout the remainder of the tournament.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Otherwise, I think that their slot should have maybe just been vacated, and given to the runner. You know, like the
like
the
a
other
team that could actually bring the whole team over.
Yeah, because that just felt really weird. That basically the team that they were in groups is not the team that they were in plans. And I think that left a pretty bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths.
I think the worrying thing is that when you get into the group stage and then you don't necessarily perform to the level that we thought that we were going to see coming out of the play-ins, that's when it's like it feels disingenuous or something like that. I think PSG thankfully saved us a little bit by playing much better in the second week.
Yes.
And, you know, being able to at least get to 3rd place instead of having to, you know, just bomb out of the group. And I think, you know, Tank and River actually played a lot better at that end of the tournament. It's just so hard though, right? Because how are you supposed to know what would have happened in play-ins with Tank and River, right? And it just adds all these unknowns. And I feel like it's something we've been dealing with as, you know, LCK people quite a lot this year, you know, because we've got our semi-final between DRX and Gen G where they have to play on a completely different patch halfway through a series, and all of the bans being removed from our spring final. And it's like, well, what would have happened and all this sort of stuff. Like, I feel like we've, there's a lot of these what ifs. And as soon as there's a what if added in a game where you're worried about competitive integrity, it just becomes so messy, you know. It's just so, even if it doesn't mean anything, right? It's just messy.
Yeah, I agree.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see the development of everything, and I mean, it just makes it more exciting as well for next year's Worlds. And then just what it means for how this quarterfinal, semis, and finals is actually going to wrap up. It's also interesting because the way that the group brackets, or the way that the brackets were drawn, China and Korea both eliminate each other before finals. Like, you know, they're Why is my brain blanking? Basically, China and China cannot meet in the finals. Korea and Korea can't meet in the finals. Yeah, there you go.
But Europe and Europe can meet in the finals, LS. That's all we need to worry about, you know? Just prepare yourself for G2 versus Fnatic, and then we're going to be totally fine.
True.
Although I think I've seen your predictions. Yeah. I'm trying to work out whether or not it's going to be Damwon that knocks out G2 or whether it's Gen G. Right now, I'm thinking Gen G is going to do it.
Yeah,
but,
I
think that's a tough one to call. I think
Generation Gaming is going to manage to pull through and I do.
Is Generation
think so.
Gaming going to knock out Damwon in the most unprecedented victory of all time?
No,
it's not going to happen.
Generation Gaming can't do that. Arnold can't even find the cold brew shop in the neighborhood. You know, I mean,
it's all going downhill. It's actually it's really funny though, because this is now Damwon doing a reverse LCK finals. Mm-hmm. They're going back down the gauntlet. You know, they started at the top last time. They didn't get to play through, so now they're going to go against the second place team in the LCK finals. Mm-hmm. Then the third, theoretically, if they manage to take down G2. And then the final boss being whoever's left from the other side of the bracket, which I assume is going to be Top Esports. And that is going to be a matchup. Very, very excited. All I wanted, right? So there was a lot of people talking about how crap the bracket is and how terrible it is. I think that if you want to have like the best games individually the whole way up the knockout stage, then this may not be the best format. Right. However, if you want to have the best final, this format worked out very, very well.
Right.
Because we don't want to have like a team kill grand final, right? You want to have like a region versus a region. And so now it's likely to be not two of the same region based on the strength that we've seen of the teams. You know, I don't want to take anything away from Fnatic and G2. I think both of them have played very well, but I think the top dogs in this tournament aren't necessarily those two. So even if one of them could make it up there, I don't think it's likely that it's both.
I think
and
Fnatic,
then we get two different regions, right? And that's cool.
If a European team's going to make the finals, I think it's more likely Fnatic if they manage the upset over TAS in the quarters. I feel like G2 has the hardest run to the championship. To go through Gen G, then Damwon, then the assumed TES, I think is a pretty big nightmare run.
I imagine that they're probably feeling pretty good because eliminating Korean teams seems to be something they're pretty good at in the world's knockout stage.
This is true.
Max upset.
So
still crying.
But you know, I mean, I did tell Nemesis that I would see him for the live viewing next week. So.
Oh man, that's a lot of BM, dude.
That's excited to hear his thoughts.
Yep. So are Fnatic up against TES first, or are they up against? Yeah, because it's Suning versus JDG, right? Is it Suning versus
Suning JDG? Yeah.
Yeah. So
it goes
esports straight out of the bat. Yeah. Oh man, that's a real out of the furnace into the fire type situation. I think that Fnatic didn't even have the easiest group at all in the group stage. It's like it doesn't get easier, does it, for these boys? But I do think that Fnatic were playing pretty good. So I'd be interested. I actually felt like, you know, if you take every game on their last day, they looked better than Gen G in most of them. Yeah. Even if Gen G ultimately smashed them in the last game, I still think that, you know, Fnatic looked good. So I think there are a lot of there's a lot to look forward to with this particular final. Yeah. I agree. The playoffs in general, right?
Yeah. I mean, Fnatic, it's not easy. The problematic, Fnatic, it's kind of awkward because even if they beat TS, whoever they go up against in their next match is very different, and then whoever they go up against in their next match is very different. I feel like G2 has the same problem. Gen G and Damwon are two different beasts, and then by the time you make it to the final, it's a different beast too. So it's not like anyone really gets to run the gauntlet against very similar approaches to the game teams.
Yeah. I think that at this point, like, if you're looking at who this suits the most as far as which teams are going to be the happiest, I think Top Esports and Damwon are both very happy with how this draw went, right? Because not having to wipe out either of those two, who do definitely look like the strongest teams in the tournament right now, I think is the main thing.
Yep.
And if Damwon do have to go through DRX and Gen G before they get to the final, they're probably going to be like, all right, this sounds great. We'll see you in the final, you know? And Top probably thinking pretty similarly, even though their final was much more competitive in summer. I still think that, you know, TS is probably pretty happy with how their form is at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to upsets though, man. Like I did my pick'ems. I'm okay for them to be destroyed. You know, I didn't manage to get perfect the whole way through with my pick'ems in the group stage, and so now I just don't care anymore. You know, so bring on the upsets. You know, have Jeesun run the gauntlet. I don't mind. I just want to have some good League of Legends as we get to the top, and I don't want to have a 3-zip depressing final. That's the thing that I want. Yeah, no, I don't want that anymore. No more. I want 5 games. I want silver scrapes in the final for 2020 Worlds. That's what I want.
Okay.
We get that. I'm a happy boy.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I do want to move ahead though, LS, because we have a special guest today calling from a very, very long way away, all the way in China, where she has been doing all sorts of interviews, translations, been on every single broadcast. I swear, I think she's on like the Chinese broadcast, the Korean broadcast, the English broadcast, like everything. She's just uber talented, and I am of course talking about Jeesun. Oh, I like the delay. All right, we have magically found Jeesun. Don't worry about the slight pause that we may have experienced, because hopefully this has been edited to the point where now Jeesun is just magically here. Nothing went wrong. No restarts needed to happen. It's not now 2 hours into the future. She is just instantly here. Jeesun, it is wonderful to have you here on the Pog State. How is it? How's life over there in China? And you've been so busy. Can you tell us exactly what you've been doing? Like what your responsibilities have been? Have you, like, how many broadcasters have you been on so far?
Maybe four or five, I guess. So LCK and Central and China and CBLO and LLA.
Oh wow! So that's 5.
Oh.
She can't count.
Well, I mean.
Okay.
Damn. So you're also working on the Brazilian broadcast and with the South American broadcast and the English broadcast and the Chinese broadcast and the Korean broadcast. So that is 5. That's just ridiculous. Jeesun. I've noticed that we haven't been able to have Jeesun every single time, and it's been notably worse. And yes, I'm entirely biased. But whenever there's a Korean player that needs to be interviewed, I'm always like, is it going to be Jeesun? I'm like, fingers crossed. And then I'm like, yeah, we got it this time. High priority broadcast. You always know whether you're on the A team if you've got the Jeesun interview when a Korean player's up there. But speaking of the Korean players, I know that you were also working in play-ins, because there are of course a lot of Korean players, even though there are no Korean teams. Play-ins did also, have some requirements for that. But I want to talk more specifically about our LCK teams. Have you had any chance to sort of catch up and talk to them about how they've been feeling so far in the tournament?
So because I not only cover the backstage interviews, I also translate for the Korean players, for the press interviews, and also features. So I get to hear a lot of their insights about this tournament, and so I can definitely tell Ruler is super confident, and he's been keep mentioning that he really wants to kind of kind of prove himself again at Worlds, because I think he's really hurt after winning like Worlds 2017. A lot of people were just saying it's not the ruler who won Worlds, it's about the item, it's about the meta. So he's been mentioning that he got a lot of comments like that, so he really wants to kind of show himself, come out really strong, and make people believe that he's the premier AD carry player. And I'm really impressed by it.
That's actually really interesting, because I remember, you know, he had that ear infection and things like that. I think it was the first day that he played in groups. Still was dominant apart from in like one game. But then in the rematch, like absolutely just picked up and hard carried. Even if you have a look at that Ezreal game where it was down like 50 CS, it didn't actually matter. He still did more damage than his opponent, I think. I think it was Reckless in that particular game. I think it was Fnatic versus Gen G. But man, like, Rule has been popping off. I think that there is an argument between him and Jackie Lover's best AD carry of the tournament. So I think that if you're ruler at the moment, I think he should be very proud of himself for absolutely silencing some of the haters. Are there any other players that you've spoken to, Jeesun, that have been interesting or have any interesting stories?
So I heard Clid is the centerpiece of Gen G right now because he is so fluent in Chinese. He's like helping his team out in so many different ways, like even like ordering foods and everything, and also assigning some of the interviews or like communicating with the Chinese staff. So that was also really impressive. And I heard, so he's one of the top priority player for the Chinese broadcast to interview with, because he can just like fluently run it with Chinese with no accent at all. So I think also the Chinese hosts loves him a lot. And also I think Kenyan is also feeling super comfortable. And also, I mean, overall, all the dominant gaming players are super comfortable right now. And they are aware that they have evolved and stepped up so much since last year.
Well, that's really good, because they've looked absolutely amazing. I hadn't really thought about the fact that Clid speaks Chinese. You know, I hadn't really considered what that's going to mean for Gen G. So that's actually really, really cool, because yeah, he was over there for so damn long. He started his career in China, so it's obvious that he must also like know all of the cool places to eat as well. You know, like has all of the extra insight, not even necessarily just speaking the language, but just like knows stuff. And in China, because it's so different from everywhere else, that must be like, so valuable.
So there is this hot pot place where like Clid is really obsessed with, and it's frog hot pot. So I'm not really brave enough to try, but I heard it's super popular in Shanghai. So maybe I will. But I heard he's craving that hot pot, the frog hot pot, a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be down to try it, because I had hot pot when I was over in China, and that stuff is just extraordinary. It's even good here in Korea. I'm not sure whether I'm like, I don't mind what it is. It can be like the Chinese hot pot, or I could just have shabu shabu here in Korea, and I'm just a happy boy. So next year, if we're in China together, let's go get frog hot pot. And if you try it this year, Jeesun, you can tell us. You can be our Clid. You can be the Clid of the LCK broadcast team if we are for some reason in China. Of course, getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit.
Cool.
But if you're on all of these broadcasts all at once, Jeesun, I'm struggling to realize like how time management necessarily works over there. So do you want to sort of just take us through like a day in the life of Jeesun in, say, like a group stage day or something like that?
So yeah, I'm pretty sure planes and groups are the craziest schedule at Worlds, because after those two stages, actually we move on to best of 5, so it's much easier. But so if I have to break it down, so I take the 1 p.m. shuttle and arrive at around like 1:30 or 40ish to the venue. So I get my makeup done it starts at 2 p.m. so it's done at around 2:30 to 2:40. Then I start watching the pre-show from the Neo production, and the game starts at 4 p.m. So I watch the game, and at the at around 30 or 20 minute mark of the game, we have all the requests for the interviews. So I get pinged for translation requests and also the LCK BSI request. So I keep that in mind, and I try to come up with some questions for the players. And then after the game's over, I head down to the BSI zone. I do the LCK interview, and then if the LCK region team won the game, or if a Korean player in different region is requested for interviews, I also do the translation for that. And after that, we have requests for the press interview, so I move over to the press zone and also do the sometimes video call interview or sometimes audio interview. So I translate for the players, which is always 10-minute long. So sometimes like when after a really important match, the players get so many requests, so I got to do like press interviews for like 30-40 minutes. So after everything's done, I realized the next game was almost over, so I couldn't barely see the game, but I also have to prepare for the next interviews. So I just like try to rewind the YouTube stream and check some of the highlights real quick, and then sprint back to the BSI zone and do BSI. So this is my routine for game until game number 6. And after game number 6, we have a bunch of press requests because the day is over. So I do the last translation for like press interviews and also sometimes for the Riot features. And after everything is over, it's always around 10 to 11 p.m. So I take the shuttle and come back to hotel.
God. I thought we overworked you, Jeesun. I thought we overworked you here. That's just ridiculous. That is just... Oh, my God. And, like, okay, so I'm trying to sort of get my head into this one, because if you're doing an interview, it's very different than if you're doing translation, right? So if you're doing a translation for the English broadcast, then you'd have Law, she'd be doing the, like, writing of the interview questions, and then you would transfer those into Korean during that moment. Do you know before each game whether you're going to be used as an interviewer or as a translator? Because being an interviewer, you have to like have all of these contingency plans for like which player it's going to be. You need to have questions prepared ahead of time based on specific things that happened in the game for like 5 players at the same time and all this. Like, that's a lot of extra work on top of what you already said, which is already too much work.
Right.
So the main rule is every region has to submit their request at around like 20-minute mark of the game in order for the interview producer to organize and the slots according to the priority. So always the winners region gets top priority. So when Tamo and DRX Genji wins, we get the first slot. So we get to have the priority of the player and also the time. And then because we have all the requests in order, I get to see like I do Clit first and do translation for ruler for lore. So I keep everything in mind before I move on to the interview zone. And I also remember that I translate all the stats analysis for our Korean casters. So I think that helps me a lot because I get to see really deep insights about the meta, about the performance with the exact numbers. So I get to kind of get a lot of ideas from those stats, preparing the question for the interviews. And also in terms of the questions, actually mainly the LCK, the broadcast writers helps me with the questions. So they always give me 3 or 4 interview questions, and also I ask them if I can add this one, and if we are running really late, maybe we have to get rid of some of the minor questions, and we may have to just choose one of top 2 or 3 priority questions that LCK viewers are curious about. So we always discuss those issues on the group chat, and that's how things are working here.
Oh my goodness. Well, we appreciate it so much, Jeesun, because that is a hell of a lot of work. And everywhere I've been looking, it's been so interesting because we've been working on the English broadcast, and I'll see you translating with Law. And then I'll go like downstairs, and on the screen, like in the back of Lol Park in like the cafeteria, I'll see you again on the Korean broadcast. I'm like, how is she doing? How did they clone Jeesun so many times? It's just ridiculous. So we absolutely appreciate everything that you've done, and it's so cool to hear that that Rule is feeling confident, because I know that he can get a little bit emotional, especially after, you know, some of the bigger like losses and stuff like that. And so it's really good to hear about him. Glad that Clid's taking care of his team. Very happy that Canyon's happy, because he's been absolutely demolishing Worlds at the moment. And now, Jeesun, instead of just talking about your work and all this sort of stuff, I want to talk to you about Worlds, and I want to ask you, how do you think we're going to go?
So a lot of people also ask the players about, like, is LCK going to get their revenge this year finally? But they're super cautious about answering this question. But they seem quite confident, but they always emphasize that we cannot always, like, compare two different, like, era of a region, because the meta is different, the patch is different, and you cannot really say, like, 2019 LCK is, like, weaker than 2020 LCK and something like that. So I also really appreciate the players are respecting other players from the past. But I had a very good feeling about the LCK coming into 2020 in general, but I haven't really been, like, out speaking about it, because I just don't want to jinx them. And also a lot of people are already, like, saying, like, Tamon is so strong, Genji, DRX, they are so strong. So I don't want too many people to kind of pay attention to the LCK. I'd rather want them to sleep on LCK.
Okay, so we're just going to say that China's looking really strong. You know, G2's the dark horse, and the LCK are there. That's what we'll say. You know, LCK are there too. And if they just happen to be holding up a cup at the end of the tournament, then we'll talk about it then. We'll do that. Okay. So note to self, everyone, Pog State fans, Jeesun will be back on to tell us just how much she knew all along that the LCK was going to win. That is, assuming the LCK wins the entirety of Worlds. I think you deserve that, Jeesun. You deserve that, because you put in so much work. And I'm really glad that now, you know, it's going to be just relaxed best of fives. The first day on Thursday, and at this point in time, it's in a couple of days. That is going to be DRX versus Damwon. So I assume you're probably going to have your work cut out for you on that particular day. And LS and I will be watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you over here, Jeesun. And I'm actually, like, even though I know you want everyone to sleep on the LCK, I feel more confident, you know? I was already feeling confident. LS and I were very outspoken about how confident we were. We were ready to have that egg on our face, because I think sometimes if you don't go in with full faith, then you're just going to feel sad anyway. So it's the result that's going to cause the issue. So that's sort of how I feel. I've been disappointed a lot over my tenure as a commentator and fan of esports, going from the OPL to the LPL to the LCK, and not only really getting 2017. That was the year that my team won. That was literally and I was only there from March, you know. Then the LCK got the memo. They're like, "Oh, Atlus is here. Quickly, we better start losing. We can't have him be happy." So I'm hoping we can break the curse here for 2020. That's what I'm hoping, and I think that we do have a really good chance. But thank you so much, Jeesun, for your input.
Actually, yeah, I just wanted to add that. So a similar thing happened to me. So I started working in the LCK in, like, 2017, but I wasn't really working on site. And then I started working on site since 2018, and I never saw my region winning. So I got used to seeing my region losing so much. So after I saw LCK winning Rift Rivals first time, last year I was actually in tears a little bit, just a little bit. So I kind of feel you, Atlas.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. So were you, like, did you start with Spo sort of, like, as, like, on-site sort of producer in 2018?
No, like, so I started at Spo at 2017, but I was almost, like, never on site. We were just, like, doing remote one for Worlds and everything. And then I started doing DM 2018 Worlds. So I saw a bunch of LCK teams losing in a very early phase. So I wasn't even shocked. I was like, maybe that's how things are going right now. So I'm really happy to see LCK teams coming out super strong right now.
Yeah, it feels good. I'm glad that the second week of groups wasn't like a mean wake up call or something like that. I'm glad that It's stable. We've got 3 teams in the knockout stage. We cannot rest in our laurels because we did that last time and it didn't work out in the end. So let's just hope that things are going to be okay. But thank you so much, Jeesun, for coming on the Pog State. And we will see you in a couple of days for some DRX versus Damwon translation and interviews, and more translation and more interviews, and then press stuff, and then home after midnight, and then waking up 3 hours later to do it all again. My God.
Beautiful.
Ridiculous. And so we're going to make you disappear right now. Oh, she disappeared. Okay, so LS. Let's talk a little bit more about the LCK teams. I imagine that a few of you guys back at home are sort of wondering about the state of the LCK teams. It was great to hear from Jeesun about, a few of the select players and how they are feeling, and it does seem to be all positives. But I want to talk about like some of our expectations coming into the tournament, LS, because I feel like I'm not super surprised with where the teams are, of course, because I'm an epically biased LCK fan, and we had 2 first seeds and 1 second seed coming out of groups. So obviously, not surprised at all. Why the heck isn't DRX first seed? That sort of thing. But also, I feel like the teams were performing in areas that we weren't necessarily expecting them to. And I want to start with DRX, right? Because they came in as our huge wild card, and I know we love draft discussion here on the Pog State, and we haven't actually spoken about draft at all up until this point. We've lasted like 40 minutes, something like that. Still haven't mentioned draft, but I'm going to do it right now. I think CVMAX has been on some of his best form that we've seen him here at this tournament. I think people like questioned like some of his drafts around like the set mids and the like not a lot of damage with Nidalee doing a lot of work, but that is the DRX style. And I feel like he's not doing his weird stuff apart from that Quinn game. Like that, but that's one game. I thought it was going to be all of them.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at DRX's drafts so far from the tournament. I don't think that they're awful. Like there's been some really weird ones. Like there was the one versus Top Esports initially. They paired Thresh with Draven and then complained about Draven. Thought that was really gross.
That's the one I was talking about. Yeah, it's not super good.
Yeah, and they also have the Lee in that game. And then you have a Quinn that refused to freeze. But then there was the game versus Top Esports yesterday where it becomes very obvious that the players don't know what the draft is trying to do relative to the opponents. And they blow a super giga omega lol lead versus Top Esports. I spent like an hour doing the VOD review actually just before Pog State tonight on my stream. That was a really sad draft, and I think it's also very alarming because it would suggest that even if DRX gets draft edges, they're probably not going to be as big or as meaningful of an edge as it should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought that game was actually really interesting because it felt like both of the teams believed that they were going to be able to outscale.
Right.
And I was just watching Vladimir get to the point where he could kill everyone by himself. And
yes.
Ornn is really good, right? And adds a lot of scaling to your team, adds a lot of gold. But I mean, the gold doesn't do much when it's lying in the death chamber.
Right.
And that's what 369 did. I think it was a really cool game.
Yeah.
Because it was so intense, latest first blood ever, that sort of thing. And, Pioshik's on his kindred, and they were playing around marks really well, and I felt like Deft got decent leads in the earlier stages, but it did feel like there was a lot of pressure, and you could feel it, like, after that first shockwave.
Right.
That's when, like, that shockwave didn't only kill the characters, that also killed the mental of DRX on the Rift in that one moment. And that's when things became a little bit more difficult.
I think overall for the Korean team, like it. Sadly, I think the teams that were having the draft, like Unicorn's Love, was really interesting at a lot of points. With their drafts, I thought that it was an interesting tournament for me so far. Fnatic's gotten some draft edges as well that are like really really big. But like as far as Korean teams are going, I don't feel like there's any really super big difference between them. I feel like a lot of stuff is random. Like even when DRX gets these kind of edges and stuff, it feels almost like they're forced team comps because of the order in which the picks come out.
Yeah.
So I think that's semi-alarming for me, but I don't think this is like the end of the world. I don't think that drafts are going to be why Korea would win or lose at this tournament. I mean, there was the Damwon versus JDG draft, which was definitely a little bit strange because they had heavy responsibility to get ahead in that game, and they just didn't really have the tools to do so.
Yeah, I don't quite remember that particular draft.
Yeah.
But that was sort of like the nothing game, wasn't it? That was the playing for pride at that point in time.
Yes. But Showmaker did look
I paid less
upset.
attention because things were already confirmed, but I think that it is still important to understand that JDG had figured out how to beat Damwon and nobody else had. And there's a chance they meet in the final. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
But when it goes from best of ones to best of five, that's when it gets so different, right? And have you noticed anything as far as like side selection as well? Because I actually found that really interesting on the Fnatic Gen G day, because Gen G looked like potatoes 2 games in a row, even though they managed to win on red side, and then jumped over on blue side against Fnatic and slaughtered them. And I'm wondering whether like side selection is going to be a thing here that we can that's going to show us some stuff.
The game versus Fnatic that everything fell apart in. I mean, it was over in 8 minutes, but I don't think the draft had anything to do with it. It was the game where Life didn't have flash and he died, and then Ruler dies twice in the first 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And then everything just keeps falling apart. Like that game is devoid of draft. I don't think color or anything like that matters.
I wasn't really that game wasn't focusing on that one. Yeah. If you don't want to take flash against a world-class team, then you probably should just go home with a loss. That's not good. But their last game certainly did give us a little bit of faith, which is, I think, why I feel a little bit better putting Gen G above G2 in the knockout stage. Although I feel like, you know how you've got like your heart and then you've got like the subconscious heart, that's sitting like behind the scenes that knows the truth. Okay. That heart of mine is telling me that G2 is probably going to win, but my actual heart, the one that's just like, I love Korea, is telling me that Gen G can easily do it and it's going to be totally fine.
Yeah.
But there's some looming G2-ness that it's a little bit dicey. Another thing that's looming. So I hate to break off from this discussion, but I feel like we're feeling pretty aligned. Plus, ladies and gentlemen, LS and I will be able to take you through a whole lot of other stuff on the broadcast for DRX versus Damwon, because we will in fact be casting that one for you guys. So we will be able to get a fair bit more information out there. But another thing that we need to talk about, and my microphone's in the way, is these super cool LCK t-shirts.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Microphone's
still in the way. Okay. Look at that.
Beautiful.
And on the back, it's got like the LCK trophy with like a whole bunch of the names of the LCK team sort of like forming the shape of the trophy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to show it to you because I can't bother getting up and I'm wearing sweatpants, so it's just going to take away from all of the professionalism of this particular show, which I refuse to do. But anyway, it's just super cool to have LCK t-shirts, and I'm extraordinarily happy. And I think that might be the end of this particular episode. I think you and I are going to be getting ready to commentate some sweet knockout stage coming up in what is probably just going to be like a few hours,
Yeah.
when this is released.
Oh, true. Actually, true.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You got anything else that you want to get off your chest, LS, now that you have everyone?
No, I think Damwon's winning Worlds, I mean, that's just how it is.
That's what I'm talking about. None of this people sleeping on the LCK. No, I'm singing it from the rooftops.
True.
That Damwon's going to be able to win. They're going to run it back. They're going to take down DRX second place, take down third place in Gen G, and then the next one's going to be like equivalent of the fourth place. So what is that, like the equivalent of a T1 versus Damwon final?
Yeah.
Sounds fine. I'm sure that's going to be totally okay. Although Top did beat T1, if I remember correctly, in MSC when we did see that one. But we don't like to talk about MSC because we got absolutely crushed. And that was a little bit sad. But not here. Not now. Not at Worlds. So thank you so much for watching. This was, of course, episode 16. Hope you guys are enjoying the World Championship. I don't think I left too much out for this particular episode, but make sure you give the video a like, I guess. Do the subscribing thing. You can ring a bell if you feel like it. Don't feel too pressured to do that. In fact, don't feel too pressured to do anything. Just hope you enjoyed the show, and looking forward to seeing you in episode 17 as well. Peace.